Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Random Redshirt podcast. I am Zach, one of the hosts. And for the 100th time, the other host with me is Chris. What's up, buddy?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Zach. Wonderful to be here again. You are right for the 100th time. It's awesome. It's incredible.
Yeah.
100 episodes it is.
Yes. Yes. This is special. For those of you listening or watching all over the globe or the interwebs, thank you so much. As you might have figured out from our intro there, this is the 100th episode of our podcast, the Random Redshirt podcast. And man, because we were just talking about this yesterday. Uh, it's crazy that here we are 100 episodes later. I mean, I'll be honest, and I think I've said this before, but we had no idea how long this would go on. For all we knew, it could go on for like 5 episodes, and then well, no one's listening, so I guess that's the end of that experiment.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's
Yeah,
still going.
it's still going, and especially it was funny because when we first started, uh, I mean, we're still like amateur, but when we were first started, we like knew nothing. We were like amateur and amateur, and so we were just thinking, oh, wouldn't it be neat to like record what we talk about like on the phone all the time, and so we were totally learning about all the different um, programs that I'm sure people take for granted now, but we were not aware of it. So we were trying to figure that out as we went along. But it has been tremendous amount of fun, kind of
Yeah.
learning that and doing it.
We started out by sitting in our chairs with a USB microphone plugged into our cell phones, and we were recording through this app called Anchor.fm. And my audio quality of my first microphone was so bloody terrible. It sounded like I was talking in a tin can, or at least some episodes. Some episodes sounded okay. Others it didn't. It sounded really bad. It's not like I was talking from like 12 miles away. Um, and I don't know, we didn't know what we were doing. We're just talking. We were discussing our favorite things. Our first episode, the very first episode of the Random Redshirt podcast, was our top 10 favorite science fiction franchises of all time. And we're going
Yeah,
to talk about some of that on this episode as we get into this 100th episode, as we celebrate 100 years of science fiction. Crazy to
that's
think science fiction's actually been around longer than 100 years, but we're going to celebrate 100 years of science fiction as we journey through this 100th episode of the podcast.
yeah, 100 and 100, and we thought it would be like a neat thing to explore those greatest moments or greatest films or greatest pieces of literature or whatever genre it has been or whatever medium it has been in science fiction that has kind of propelled science fiction, that has been a impact to the genre, that has been influential to the genre. Like and some of it we know, some of it um we're not that familiar of, so we're going to be learning about it as we go through too. But this will be really 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 kind of neat to do. And when we were thinking about the parameters, right, it was right last 100 years, pretty much from 1923 to the present, all different sorts of mediums for science fiction. And again, anything that's been influential, impactful, that has been meaningful to us, for the genre, and and could be in pop culture, or pop culture related, or very serious science fiction related as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. Now, a couple of housekeeping items first
Yeah.
before we get started here. If this is your first time watching us or you're returning, thank you, or listening, thank you so much, all over the globes and the interwebs. We really, really do appreciate it. If this is your first time, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Check us out there for all the latest happenings, announcements, celebrity guest announcements, conversations, interviews, whatever you want to call them. I label them interviews, but they're just conversations. We have people. We have a ton of them all over the podcast, both on our YouTube channel as well as wherever you get your podcast. So be sure to check us out there. Follow us, subscribe, hit the like button, bell, the follow, whatever the button is on your preferred method of media that you are tuning into us. We really, really do appreciate that. And Chris, we cannot do this episode without thanking our listeners, watchers, subscribers that are all over the 40 some countries that have tuned into us and continue to tune into us, or are all of our YouTube subscribers that continue to grow. We thank you so much. There's a slew of you that show up for every episode during the premiere and even after, and watch and comment and like and give us feedback, and we love it. We really, really love it. So thank you so much to all of you who have made this possible and continue to help this show grow, because we love it, Chris.
And we do. Zach, thank you for mentioning that. It is when they watch our premieres and when they comment on YouTube or just listen to the podcast, it's so meaningful. I know for both Zach and I, just to have people come in and participate and be part, be welcoming to us and making us feel like part of that community. It just really is heartwarming. It's impactful and meaningful, and I know like it personally like is gratifying for both myself and for you, Zach. I know it really helps us a lot.
Yeah, it really does. It means a lot. And of course, we cannot forget all of the incredibly amazing guests we've had. We have been so fortunate, so lucky to have had so many conversations with some very wonderful people, Chris, both in movies and television, production, behind the scenes, art department, production, you name it. They've been all over. And it's just been phenomenal. And we've had podcast collaborations and we have future ones coming up. And it's just been wonderful. So thank you to the following guests we've had. I don't think we left anybody off. I know we have more people coming, but thank you to our guests, my good buddy Sean Cannon, Bruce Horak, Caitlin Hopkins, Tracy Coco, Doug Drexler, Chelsea Murphy, Eric Allen Hall, Tony Kim, Max Cervantes, the Duras Sisters podcast, Mark Cartier and Erica LaRose, of course, from Shuttle Pod Show. Jenny Johnson, who is also one of our guest hosts for the Picard Season 3 reviews, at least the second half of it. And that was fantastic. Elizabeth Dennehy, Justin Underwood from Spidey Hits on YouTube, Ron B. Moore, my dear, dear friend, Natalia Nogalich, the Now Visitor, Liz Klukowski, and Matt Williams, the legendary Hollywood producer. We have been so fortunate, Chris, to have these guests on with us. And man, have we learned a lot, and we've loved our time with them.
Yeah, it has touched our hearts. It just getting to know these individuals and what inspires them, what they've learned from life, what they can help share has been incredibly meaningful. Again, for both Zach and I, but incredibly meaningful. And we know for our viewers that have watched, it has made me personally feel like now more part of the community and not just an outside of like a observer. Now it's like I really feel just blessed to have participated and been able to talk with them and have them and kind of share some time with them. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, and we not all of our guests have been related to Star Trek, but a lot have. And so I think I said this on the podcast before, and I know you've heard me say it before, but when you have people on that and you have a conversation with people who are connected to that franchise, that franchise means so much to me. And I know it means a lot to you as well, Chris. It just has helped me feel more connected to the Star Trek franchise than I ever have at any point in my life. Having other guests on helps me feel connected to what they've worked on, right? We had Matt Williams on. I feel more connected to Home Improvement now than I did before, which is wonderful. And it's so gratifying and wonderful that they have taken the time to come on and spend time with us and share stories and their careers and stuff, because they're all busy. They have things to do, but they took time out of their life and their busy days to come share with you and with us some wonderful thoughts. So
That's beautiful. Beautifully said,
yeah.
Zach.
Thank you. Yeah. So we didn't want to forget. We didn't want to not thank all of you who have watched and listened to us over the last 100 episodes, and to our guests as well. And believe me, we have some more incredible guests coming. It's amazing. I'm working on scheduling stuff right now. We've got some stuff confirmed. I'll announce that as soon as I can, as we get a little bit closer to the time. But yeah, we've been so blessed, and here's to another 100 episodes, Chris.
Here's to another 100 episodes. That's right. That's
and
right.
many more after that. Yes.
Yeah. It's 100, but it seems like that has gone by very fast, my friend.
Yeah. It seem like we've only been doing this for maybe like a year, and what, this May will be 3 years? That's insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah. And this is not like we've said this before, guys and gals, but this is not like a job for us. This is just a hobby. This thing we do on the side, right? So the fact that, with as busy as we can be with life and family and everything else and jobs and so forth, uh, I think I can I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for you, Chris. I feel very blessed to be able to have this opportunity to do this. Um, you know, when we started talking about the idea of doing this, I'm like, I don't know if maybe Chris won't want to. He's busy. Maybe he's not going to want to do this. This is, but we have, and it's been wonderful, and I'm grateful that we've been able to share this journey together and all this stuff we've learned and discussed, and it's been awesome.
Yeah, likewise on all of that, my friend. Yeah,
All
yeah,
right,
you're
enough with the sappy stuff. Let's move on.
nice. Nice.
No. So let's get into this, Chris. I know you talked about let's walk us through the parameters. What kind of things are we gonna discuss here on our 100 for 100 episode?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the general parameters, I said start from 1923 to present, but there's going to be a couple things that I kind of mentioned that are actually pre 1923,
Yeah.
just because they're just so foundational for the genre. So I think that'll be great. And I personally was trying to think of things that were outside of Star Wars or Star Trek, just so I could focus my mind on that and bring some of those things in there. But in terms of the mediums, that the mediums are literature, books, movies, television, comics, graphic novels, games, could be games or video games, could be anime, or you know or cartoons, like any of those that have been like influential over the last 100 years. And I'm certain, um between you and I, we're definitely not going to be able to, we're going to forget some.
Yeah.
So
Well, we
those of
could be
you,
here for 10 hours just covering
right.
books alone for science fiction,
I
right?
know. So our watchers, our viewers, if you have some that we miss and you're thinking, this would be a great one, as a suggestion for Zach and I to explore and to come back and talk about, yeah, please do. Please talk about that with us. So
Yeah.
in general, that's kind of the parameters there.
Well, maybe we should start with books, Chris, because we have several mediums here you
Yeah.
mentioned. Maybe we should just kind of go by each category and talk through some of our things that stand out to us, or some things that are impactful or influential to us in each of those mediums. So why don't we start with books? Might as
Yeah,
well.
we will.
Yeah.
We will. Are you good taking turns? We can
Yeah.
all start and
Yeah, go for it, man.
and
Go
go.
for it. You start us out. I know you are more of an avid reader than I am, although I am trying to improve my reading skills. And by reading skills, I mean like the amount that I read, not necessarily the fact that I can or cannot read. I can read, I promise.
You can read, yes.
I can read, albeit I don't get a lot of time, and the time I do gets usually in the evenings, and I'm tired, and so I don't get a crazy amount of time to read. But I am Chris. I'm trying to improve myself by reading more. So you are more of an avid reader than I. So why don't you start us off?
Certainly. So this is actually pre 1923, and it'd been something I've been thinking about. It is, I have it here. It is Mary Shelley, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein,
Mm.
which is often thought of the first science fiction piece of literature. Science fiction, because it is exploring, man's ability to use science to create life and to create like an artificial life form right there. So this was 1818. And when you think about
That was
Frankenstein, yeah,
1818. I
1818.
thought it was, I knew it was 1800s, but it was that, I thought it was like mid to late 1800s, but 1818. Wow.
Yeah, 1818. Um, Now, if I am wrong, I believe I'm right, but if I'm wrong, someone will let me know. I'm sure that if I'm off. But you think about like all this inspired from Frankenstein. It was Dr. Victor Frankenstein, and in the book, the monster is only called the monster. He actually doesn't have a name. But the sentience of the monster, where man has aspired to become a deity, become a god, and he wants to create, artificially create life in his own image. But you think about what that inspired. I think like, if we think about other authors that have come after Philip K. Dick, who wrote "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep," and that inspired the Blade Runner universe with the replicants, us creating replicants. For me, you just tie that string all the way back to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein as you know, as this beautiful piece of inspirational science fiction. And maybe, maybe there's something before that that's maybe could potentially be in like Greek literature way back, but I haven't done that homework yet.
There's actually quite a few science fiction books that came from the 1800s.
Yeah.
That it's crazy to think that we think science fiction, we think, maybe 1940s, 1950s is kind of that beginning, but you're right. I mean, the 1800s is really where some of these foundational novels came from that really kind of started this genre that wasn't even really considered a genre at the time, I don't believe.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't. It was these fantastical things that came after. But like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, from they were pretty prolific writers in the late 1800s, and Jules Verne crafting the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea,
Yep.
fantastic book that later became a movie, and then Journey to the Center of the Earth. So which was just like a fantastic book there. So that was really great, and H.G. Wells. Which probably the most popular thing H.G. Wells is known for is War of the Worlds,
Right.
that was read on the radio by, I'm gonna forget his name.
Orson Welles.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yep.
that was incredible.
And there was also The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson in 1886.
Oh,
So
yes.
that's a big one. That's kind of that sort of, kind of monster type of thing. And really, you get this inspiration from that book for things like the Hulk, the Nutty Professor, things like that. So, yeah.
Oh, that was great, man. Yeah.
Yeah, big and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde has been done a lot, and this idea of split personality and this idea of science being used to do experiments on things or the human body and so forth. Really, this really important literature that came out of that book in the late 1800s. So yes,
Mhm.
yeah, Jules Verne there. I mean, you're talking books that were written sometime, not long after the end of the Civil War and late 1800s with that. I mean, those are some really powerful, really low ones. I mean, even H.G. Wells is The Time Machine. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
Late 1800s, close to the turn of the century, and you have a book talking about time travel. I mean, that's pretty
Very,
groundbreaking.
yeah, it
You know what
is
I mean?
very
That's
for, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know what the literacy rate in the United States was back in 1895, but my guess is it's not as high as it is today. So the fact you have of somebody writing about a time machine and traveling through time, and I looked it up, and it says the time traveler goes some 800 millennia into the future, that finds humans have evolved divided along class lines, which is pretty interesting because there's some kind of some class lines these days, and it ain't 800 millennia in the future either. So
Thank you for
yeah,
bringing up the Time Machine. Have you seen the movie?
I have not actually. No, I
Me,
have not.
yeah, maybe if this like we could watch the movie, and then as a perspective, like deep dive in the future, we could take a look at the movie and come back and talk about it.
Mm.
Yeah, I have watched the movie, the Time Machine, and it was pretty excellent. And I had not even thought about those aspects of literacy in the United States. Um, that's a really good point. And um, the different classes, I hadn't really thought about the Time Machine in that like perspective. But I remember I have read the book. It was a while ago, and I have seen the movie. But what you just said actually makes me want to go back and explore it again. Oh man, that's great.
Well, there's another book. And now I want to read this book. I have not read it, but it seems very fascinating. And this is a book called Metropolis by
Mhm.
Thea von Harbaugh, I think is how you say it, 1925. And this is an idea that uh in this book it envisions a future where the lower classes work just tirelessly in order to provide the rich a very luxurious, very easy life. And in the novel, there's a domino effect that is created. And so very interesting. I'm curious to read this because you could argue there are some aspects of this book that are that way today. So I'm fascinated to read maybe some of these books that took place in the early part of the 20th century that may not be far off from where things are at right now. So that's a book on my list I'd like to read at some point called Metropolis.
Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah, that fascinates me too, to kind of compare what were the projections to what you just said, like where are we now? So
Yeah.
that is wonderful. That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, I have there's a couple books here that are interesting, because one is a dystopia and one is a utopia.
Mm.
You hear those terms like a lot, but this one was really influential. I know, like a Clockwork Orange, it's just a very dystopian kind of view of the world, and a very it's kind of an ugly world in a Clockwork Orange. And then it also was the inspiration for the movie, the Stanley Kubrick movie, and the book by Anthony Burgess, and plenty of violence and kind of explicit things in both the book and the movie. And then uh, a utopia, but it's not really a utopia, Brave New World from Aldous Huxley. And it's been like a long time since I've read it. So I'd have to go back to kind of remember all of what that was. But I know those were very, very influential books. Because when you're thinking about the future, uh, it's natural. You think about, hey, what is the future going to be? A utopia? Like, I know we talk about that with Star Trek, like, a lot. And then, and if it's a dystopia, what's that going to look like? Particularly when it comes in the form of the world and government, and how the government relates to the people. So yeah.
Yeah, there's now I'm not sure if this book inspired the movie I, Robot or not. I want to say it did, but the book
Oh.
called The Complete Robot by Isaac Asimov. Um that yeah. I'm curious whether that was because it talks about the three laws given to the robots. So
Mhm.
I think that was the book that inspired I, Robot with Will Smith. But that would be another good one. I think another influential one for sure. Fahrenheit 451 is a very influential book. Very kind of dystopian. You think dystopian future. This is a 1953 book, but it's in the book. It talks about the fear that television would one day crowd out books, and it's yeah, very 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 influential book. Um,
Wow,
I'm a,
1951 is when that one came out.
1951 was it? Okay.
Or no, I'm sorry.
I had 53.
53?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
wow. That
And,
I have not read that, but that makes me want to read that book for sure. That sounds pretty cool.
yeah. And yeah, it's this idea. I found some a really good list of books on bookriot.com.
Yeah.
And so I'm using some of this list here by Ray Bradbury was the author. And it the influence stems from his interpretation as a piece of anti-censorship literature, not a warning against the evils of television. This idea of censoring and censorship, and we see that today. We're seeing this idea of censorship even going on today.
Oh,
So
that
that's
is
interesting.
cool.
Now, this
Yeah.
this other book I saw too, Chris, from 1959, a book you mentioned here in the podcast by Robert Heinlein, Starship Troopers.
Hmm. I love that book, man. I
Yeah.
love that the Starship
Oh,
Troopers
yeah, there it is
book.
right there. Yep, there it
Yeah.
is. I have not read it, but I've only seen the movie. But I know you
Yeah.
mentioned how good the book is.
Yeah, and I got the movie here. I
And
brought
the
the
movie.
starships. Yeah. Um, the book is, yeah, so good. So like what you were saying about Ray Bradbury, kind of talking about censorship in his Fahrenheit 451. I would say, like, Robert Heinlein's Starship Trooper, at least in the book, what came across to me was the theme of citizenship, and like
Mhm.
each person like contributing to their part. for their country and the world. And in this case, it's for the world because
Yeah.
it's a world government like dealing
Yeah.
with the aliens. But that came across like as a really powerful message for me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. It's a great book. I don't, hopefully I didn't steal your thunder on that one.
No, I'm so
Okay.
glad you brought that up. That's
Yeah.
that's cool.
What about The Ultimate Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? There's
Oh yeah.
another influential sci-fi book, right? I mean, we know the Hitchhiker's Guide as far as the movie went. Some people didn't like it, some people did, but I know the book is really big. Douglas Adams is the author. Um, but it's had a big influence too. You know, it was this book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy, actually helped assist in naming two separate species, two asteroids in a NASA project. And
Oh
actually,
yeah.
it's arguably one of the 5 or 6 most influential sci-fi books of all time,
Yeah.
according to the bookriot.com website. So yeah, lot of really good stuff that it came out um in from like early 1800s, like you mentioned, with Frankenstein,
Hmm.
into like the mid 50s, into the 60s, and then we got into like the 70s and 80s, and there was some good stuff in there as well. uh I mean, 1990 Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton
Yeah.
was massive. That launched an entirely huge science fiction, I guess you call it sci-fi,
Yes.
science fiction, right? Science fiction franchise.
It sure is. Yeah. The giant Jurassic Park franchise,
Yeah.
which is cool. And uh, those, at least they feel like in a way it's happening in some science, right? But it's kind of close to what we think is plausible, to say, hey, we think we could go back and we can do this. And um, I mean, science has made quite a lot of strides, and I know they've brought back one extinct species, and I want to say from a bird, um, it, in the
Was it
recent
the
past. So
was it the um condors, maybe?
I think you're right, something
I
like
don't
that. One of the
Something like that. Yeah, I don't remember
Yeah,
exactly, but yeah.
yeah, but yeah, the Michael Crichton Jurassic Park one is huge.
Yeah.
Um, in the 80s, this is interesting because I've read books from this author, William Gibson. He wrote Neuromancer, and he wrote Mona Lisa Overdrive. But when you think about movies like The Matrix, these like huge movies like The Matrix, where we're all in a simulation in virtual reality, some of his works were just like, that was it. That was like groundbreaking and like influenced all of the stuff that came after that. I think he like Johnny Mnemonic, that
Mm,
was a Keanu Reeves science fiction film. I think he inspired that. So William Gibson is like, his work was pretty. He was really future seeing on a lot of what he was doing. So it was really
yeah.
cool.
Now, I would say, Chris, we would be remiss if we didn't mention Timothy Zahn. For those of you
Ah,
out there who are Star
yeah,
Wars fans and are fans of the Star Wars Expanded Universe books, that really we know it was the future of Star Wars post Return of the Jedi,
mm,
not counting those other movies that shall not be named, right?
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyways, but the Thrawn trilogy, the Thrawn trilogy was kind of that first set of books that gave readers the sequel to the original trilogy, right? Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, The Last Command were books that really did that. Starting with this book right here, Heir to the Empire.
Yeah,
This is, and I started reading this again. I've got to pick it back up, but I want to finish. I want to get this Benjamin Sisko book read. I really want to talk to the author. That'd be awesome to have him on. But Heir to the Empire, Timothy Zahn, the Thrawn trilogy, and he's written a bunch of other Thrawn books. Really, significant for Star Wars. And these books launched, I think, really an entire universe of books that have been incredible for the Star Wars franchise.
yeah, and you have to give like special. I think it's this other level of special recognition for that, because so there was the original trilogy there, um, from Star Wars, but Timothy Zahn was able to take the ideas there expand upon the ideas, give this like future that could be for the characters we love, and then it was embraced by the fans, right? So like,
Yeah.
oh, can incorporate that and embrace it and think, yeah, that's all good. um and so I think that's like, that's special props and special credit to be able to do that, because that's no easy thing for sure. As I think probably Disney found out.
Yeah,
Oh.
for sure.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, there's another book. Well, it's really a series, but I'm going to mention the first book
Yeah.
that I have started to read and you have read, and that's Leviathan Wakes,
Yeah.
which starts this franchise, right?
Yeah.
This franchise of the Expanse series. And it's interesting because this first book, in which I have sitting on my shelf right here, for those of you who are watching YouTube, um, for not only did it start a TV series and it did a book brand, book series out of it as well, but you have in addition, obviously, to the television, you have comic books, board games,
Yeah.
RPGs now, which I have the RPG book over there, The Expanse. And apparently it won the Hugo Award for Best Series in 2020. So
Wow.
that's you talk about of like the 2000 and teens, and in early 2000s. That's a pretty significant book as far as science fiction goes, I would say.
Yeah. That is a very significant series.
Yeah.
And it's been great. It's like a nine book series. Well, there's more books than that, but at least from what I've seen, like on the main kind of storyline, a nine book series. I'm on book 6 right now, and enjoying that. And yeah, it's kind of neat. Like it's in the. I'll try not to spoil it like too much, but right now it feels like within the solar system, and then within humanity, like a big civil war happening within humanity, like in the
Oh
solar
yeah.
system. So yeah,
Yeah. The
it's pretty
battle
cool.
for resources, right? Battle
Hmm.
for limited resources for sure. There's a book that I saw again this on this list from bookriot.com that sounds very fascinating that I want to read. It's from 2019 by the author Caitlin Starling, and the book is called The Luminous Dead. And according to bookriot.com's website, it mentions, and I'm quoting specifically directly from the website here, it says it's a horrifying vision of asteroid mining, one in which people take on cybernetic enhancements just to get a job that may very well kill them. It's
Oh,
very eerie, and as one of the most popular sci-fi horror titles to come out in recent years, it's sure to be a foundational text for new writers interested in the genre. So kind of combines a little bit of some of the cybernetic robot stuff from other sci-fi books with this idea of the expanse, the asteroid mining, the solar system stuff. That sounds like a really fun book to read.
oh, it sure does. I
So
had
I'm gonna have
not.
to add that to my list of future reads.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that. I had not heard about that, so that's going to be
I had not
for
either
sure a
until I
good
found
one.
this website that had these things on there, which is great. So there's a lot. But what else, Chris? Any other books you can think of that come to mind that you think are really, influential in the sci-fi genre?
Yeah, I had like I'll bring two other series from the sci-fi genre. So the Frank Herbert series, like the Dune series. So I know that
Mm.
the new movie is coming out this year, has been like hugely influential. I've read the first trilogy, but there's more after that. I think his son picked up after Frank Herbert passed away. His son picked up some of the writing and continued it after that. And then the author Arthur C. Clarke, starting with 2001. I happen to have 3001 on video right now for those that are listening. So that series from 2001 on Arthur C. Clarke, just a great prolific science fiction writer, like Heinlein, like Bradbury, like Isaac Asimov. So great to see those. To me, that's what I stood out to me as like, hey, some of these great pieces of books and literature, like along the last like 100 years, along with Philip K. Dick's, all of his short stories, but I just don't have them with me.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it just reminded me. I'd be remiss if we didn't mention Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game. That's
Oh my goodness.
1985, I think it was. So
Yeah.
80s. There you go. Ender's Game. Yeah. The movie wasn't super great, in my opinion. I know it had Harrison Ford in it, but I read the book in high school, and it's a really, really good book. So we would be very remiss if we did not mention Orson Scott Card
Yeah.
as an
Thank you,
author,
Zach.
as an influential author in science fiction.
Yeah.
And we know
So
we're gonna forget somebody, right?
yeah,
But
we're
we're
totally gonna forget. Yeah.
thinking about the ones that stand out the most to us and are
Yeah.
influential.
The Ender's Game, I know, so there's a it's more than a trilogy now, but it was a trilogy, and I finished, I finished that trilogy, and now they're exploring more of Ender's life. But it was really interesting because after they fought the bugs, then it was kind of an exploration of them going to other planets, and then finding out more about the bugs kind of existence, and then Ender kind of developing this relationship with the Bug Queen.
Mm.
To my wife was looking at me weird. I didn't mean it in any weird way. I was like it's like I just developing a sympathy for the Bug Queen, I should
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Kind of some similarities there to Starship Troopers a little bit, right? Fighting bugs and
Yeah. Yeah.
there's the brain bug versus the queen bug and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. That was
Yeah.
awesome.
So
Yeah.
yeah, lots of incredible books, and we know we're gonna leave some off. It's fine. I
Mhm.
mean, it's fine. If you can think of some authors or books that you think are really influential in the science fiction genre over the last 100 years or more even, then please, by all means, put that down. We went more than 100 years, but put that down. Let us know. Leave us a comment. Send us an email. Whatever. Message us. That's fine. And let us know what we missed so we can make sure we look into that and add that to our list. But I know, Chris, you also mentioned movies as another medium of science fiction over the last 100 years. It's
Yeah.
interesting. I had never heard of this movie, uh, and apparently it was made in 1902, and it's a movie called A Trip to the Moon.
Yeah.
Now it was like a satire movie apparently. But digitaltrends.com mentioned that this was the first science fiction movie, and I'm quoting, ever created, black and white short that holds great importance in the world of cinema. It's based on a story by Jules Verne, and it follows a team of astronomers who launch themselves into the eye of the moon because they think that the moon has a face, right? The eye of the moon, and encounter the alien Selenitus, or however you say it, on the lunar surface. It's the movie apparently was known more for its technical achievements, but it still stands out as a goofy satire of imperialism and colonialism. So
Ah.
I'd never heard of that movie before. That's crazy. I don't know if you ever have, Chris, or if any of you watching or listening have, please let us know. I'd never heard of it. But
Yeah.
1902.
Yeah, that's the one where the rocket, goes right into the moon, and you kind of see that.
Yep.
Yeah, I had heard about that. I watched some of it, like just particular part where the rocket goes into the moon's eye.
Yeah. I'd never heard of it.
Yeah. Well, it's cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing? Like, so Jules Verne is like, I mean, this is um his book, right? So Jules Verne would have written his book in the 1860s ish, around there, like 100 years before we would have gone to the moon. So he's kind of,
Yeah.
projecting that out. But that's so cool that he's able to do that.
Yeah. It's
Nice.
insane. But there's I mean, we think about science fiction movies, and my goodness, we could be here for hours just
Mhm.
talking about the sci-fi movies because I think, there are many science fiction movies based off of some of these incredible books we've talked about, right? In science
Yeah.
fiction. But there's also a lot of standalone movies that are not based off of books. And whether they were based off of books or not, they've had a massive impact on what I feel like is the movies to me are what really helped establish the genre itself that made this in the science fiction into its own genre, right? The books were kind of that foundational piece, but the movies I think help create the genre of science fiction. I don't know if you feel that way. That's just kind of how I look at it.
Well, especially because with the movies, you can draw in this huge audience, right? So the movies will get either at the drive-through theaters or at the movie theater, but now you've got more advertising that can come with the movies. This audience that can come in and just get transported to this other world for a couple hours.
Yeah.
So it's accessible, really accessible for them to like come in and then um, just get enraptured by that genre. So definitely like the movies like helped grow science fiction a lot, and it's just being so um you want to see you want to see that spectacle, right? So the movies and television is just such a natural theme or natural medium for that to be put on.
Yeah, absolutely. And there have been
Yeah.
some unbelievable movies from really, I would say, many, many, many decades. But what are some of the most influential science fiction? Maybe not necessarily your favorite, because I know we'll talk about some of our favorite overall, but like, what do you think of some of the most influential science fiction movies that are out there?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about one from the 70s. I might go back earlier um after this one, but this one, you remember Alien with the original Alien by with Sigourney Weaver in it and the director Ridley Scott.
Do I
Eh,
remember the
Do you
original?
remember?
Of course I remember it, Chris. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're both Alien fans.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
oh,
we're both,
absolutely.
but that spawned like a franchise after that, right?
Yeah.
And
Massive franchise.
massive franchise, and it's just kind of like, I think it was extremely influential. Like if we're out colonizing or mining or setting up colonies and we encounter a hostile alien that just is, we completely don't understand, but wow, did it just set up this, was so influential in the terms of like horror too. It was
Yeah.
legit like scary, and so you've got this whole like subgenre in science fiction of this horror science fiction.
Yeah. Well, if you look at movies from like the 50s and the 60s, and far as like
Mm-hmm.
the science fiction genre, they're not as they're a little less serious, let's put it that way. They're a
Yeah.
little bit hokey and cheesy and, corny and things like that, which, some of the 50s stuff is still wonderful to watch because if you enjoy it for what it is, it's like the 66 Batman, right? Adam West and
Yeah.
Burt Ward. It's comparative today. It's so corny and so cheesy, but if you enjoy it for what it is, it's so wonderful. So that being said, the 50s and 60s stuff is great in its own way, but the 1970s, I think, is really where science fiction began to take on a more serious note, where science fiction became more of a serious genre versus just going and watching some attack of the 50-foot woman or giant spider or something really crazy. And Alien is a great one to mention, Chris. I'm glad you did, because that we get like a big like sci-fi horror crossover. I feel like that's super serious. It's gruesome. It's grotesque. But it's pretty original, right? At least based on the way they have it. But then you also get movies like
Mhm.
Close Encounter of the Third Kind, which is 1977. That was a really important movie, a pretty early on Steven Spielberg directed movie. And that movie today still is mentioned as one of the gold standards for sci-fi.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I thought it was a sweet movie. Like how is that first encounter going to be? Like when,
Yeah.
assuming those aliens um, are not hostile, like in
Right.
Alien.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, think about it, right? So many sci-fi movies, the aliens are usually hostile, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now there is a movie, I want to say it was made in the 90s, that's a very much a satire spoof movie that deals with this idea of humans thinking the aliens would be nice and they were going to be greeting them and doing all those nice things, and then they end up being hostile. And that's the movie Attack from Mars, that had that
Oh,
all-star
yeah.
cast, right? With like Michael J. Fox and Jack Nicholson. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. I mean, there's a million other people there in that movie too, but yeah, like you just don't know, right? But there's so many of these horror sci-fi crossovers where the aliens are psycho and they just want to exterminate the human race, and so it's very interesting. You get that, but there's also another movie in the 80s, early 80s, that deals with aliens that are not hostile, and that's E.T. another Spielberg masterpiece. E.T. is also, I think, kind of one of those gold standard movies for sci-fi. It's a different, obviously a different approach than the movie Alien,
Mhm.
but still a movie that today is incredibly influential in the science fiction genre.
I agree completely. From the and ET shown from the perspective of innocence, like, and from a child, right? So
Yeah,
yeah, and very, very sweet. So yeah,
a
I'm glad
180
you mentioned
from
that.
Alien.
180. Yes, 180 from Alien. Yeah,
Complete 180.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a feeling we're gonna be I was thinking about Spielberg science fiction. There'll be several we can mention in this show too. He's got some masterpieces in science fiction in here.
Oh
Spielberg
yeah,
does.
he really really does. But I'm curious, Chris, what you think on this thought. The
Mhm.
1970s and the 1980s are probably, I would argue, the 70s and 80s might be. Now I'm adding 70s in there so we don't have another great nerd debate number two argument here. But the 70s and 80s, I think, were maybe the two most influential decades for science fiction movies. The 70s is where we started to see, I think, sci-fi take more of a serious approach, or it got more, um, what's the word I'm looking for? People took it more seriously. It became more popular. In the 1980s, really helped kind of build off of that, and of course, sort of the 90s. But the 70s and the 80s put out some of the most groundbreaking, most influential science fiction movies I think we've seen. Another one I want to think of from the early 80s that I know you're a massive fan of, Chris, and that's Blade Runner from 1982.
Yeah, Blade Runner 1982. I've thought about this movie a lot. This Blade Runner has my favorite moment in science fiction, um, bar none.
Really? In all of
Yeah.
science fiction is your favorite? Really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe it. I was thinking about that. Yeah, it's my favorite moment, more so than any scene in Star Trek or Star Wars.
Okay, so
Um,
share the moment with us. I don't know if you I actually don't know if you've shared this with us on this podcast or me at all, period. So let me hear. I'm curious.
yeah. It is. It's near the end of the film, and it's probably many people's favorite moment. But it's near the end of the film where Roy Batty, he's like a Series 6 replicant, right? And um, he's near death, and he's been trying to run from Deckard, Harrison Ford's character, who's been hunting him, and he's been they've been fighting, and Roy's been beating up Deckard, and Deckard's like clinging for his life, like at the ledge of a building, so he's about to fall to his death, and Roy Batty's last act is to save Deckard's life,
Mm.
and he saves his life, and then now he's dying. It's raining, and there's just his beautiful monologue at the end of the movie that I know a lot of people have heard, but he's talking about his memories that he's had, but he's realizing his life is so short, and he's thinking, what's going to happen with my memories now, and all these memories will be lost like tears in the rain, and
Mm.
so just that is just a beautiful moment for me. This ties into, because I completely agree with you, in the 70s and 80s, like on science fiction becoming more groundbreaking in the 70s and 80s. This it, movies movies from that time frame. Now you have these books, right? These books in the 50s by these by Heinlein and some of those influential authors. These really kind of philosophical books have been done, which allows these movies to kind of catch up, because these movies are taking influence from these authors that have done their works, and like Philip K. Dick, that's did work in the 60s and 80s, but now you've got these movies to take inspiration. So it took that kind of time. Now they could bring these ideas of philosophy into the 70s and 80s science fiction genre, which I think you totally hit on, because that's what made them groundbreaking. Like now they're thinking through philosophical ideas, whereas in the 50s, and the movies that were in the 50s and 40s and 30s, like There's there's Flash Gordon, there's the monster movies, Godzilla, and the Attack of the the giant creatures. Those were like more like traditional archetypal good versus evil, good versus like
Right.
evil aliens, or just like this huge, or fighting monsters. But now you get into the 70s and 80s, and it's like these questions of philosophy and ethical questions, and where are we going to be in the future, and utopias and dystopias, and now let's start exploring them on the film.
Well, I love that they went back and the movie makers went back and they found these stories from decades before, right? Even in the
Uh,
70s and 80s, they were decades old. Some of these books, and they went back and they told those stories and they brought those stories to life on the screen. Stories that people may not have actually ever read had they not seen the movie, right? Or didn't know anything about until they saw the movie. There are many people who don't read, not because they can't, they're not readers. I'm kind of in that category. I try to read as much as I can. I know I need to read more and I'm trying to for sure. So many books I want to read. But more people go to back in the day, maybe not as much anymore, but more people went to the movies and did read books, I would say,
mhm.
for a long time, especially in the 80s and 70s and things like that. And so they're bringing these stories to the big screen to tell them. And they've chosen some absolutely incredible books that, like you said, Chris, have very deep philosophical concepts and ideas and things that um, need to be discussed, need to be thought about and brainstormed and brought to the masses.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
So
so
cool.
that's another big movie. Obviously in the 1970s, we can't obviously not talk about it, but 1977 was arguably the greatest science fiction movie made of all time, and that was Star Wars.
Yeah, which is huge, right?
Or at least it launched the greatest sci-fi franchise. I would say Empire Strikes Back is better than the first one, but we won't go down that rabbit hole because that's a deep rabbit hole that we'll go down. But yeah, Star Wars came out in '77, and that launched what some people would argue is the greatest sci-fi franchise of all time. Some people might even have that number one on their franchise list.
Indeed.
Some people
Indeed.
might have that number two in their franchise list, but that's a whole nother debate we won't get into right now. So, but yeah, I mean, it's insane, Chris, when you look back how many unbelievable franchises and sci-fi movies made their appearance in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, yeah, it totally is. Um, if I could go back, I want to go back to the late 60s, because this was we talked about this in the book, but 2001: A Space Odyssey
Yeah,
did come out
that's true. Yep.
like in the late 60s. So that was good. And that was okay, 68 was the year that, if I get my year correct, that's the year that the United States was able to orbit. I think they did an orbit around the moon. So that was,
Yeah, that would have been
yeah,
Apollo 8.
Apollo 8. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big movie. I know we mentioned 70s and 80s, but that's true. That is an influential movie. 2001: A Space Odyssey is still, I would say, also up there as one of the gold standards
Yeah.
for science fiction movies for sure.
And can I bring in a recent one that I know
Yeah,
you and I
of
both
course.
love? Yeah. Interstellar.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
It's
that's a
a little
beautiful one.
controversial. Some people thought it was really stupid and they hated it. Others, I thought it was really good. It moved me emotionally, just like that
Hmm.
that moment when he's come up from the surface, of that planet that had I think the water. They were looking for one of the surviving astronauts, and he comes up from the planet, and because of the time dilation close to the black hole, it's been decades since why they've been down there. But for them, it was a matter of what 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it was, and he comes up and finds all these recordings of his kids who are now grown, and he's seeing these every so often. They send out these messages into the void, as what they think is the void, and he just starts bawling because he
Yeah.
realizes, his choice, his decision to leave home is it's in a sense destroyed his family, right? It's he gave up on being there and being a part of his kids' lives in order to go out and attempt to continue the human species, right, and colonize somewhere else and kind of almost start over. That really that emotionally kicked the snot out of me the first time I watched it. Even every time I watch that movie, I have to skip over that part. I can't. I have a hard time watching that. It's a very moving movie. But yeah, that's a, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a really really powerful, more modern movie.
Yeah. Had a lot of scientific advisors. I know one famous scientific advisor that was on that movie, but you're right. It was very, very moving. Like you and I are both fathers, so both, just kind of experience that movie from that frame of reference, was very impactful for us,
Yeah,
personally. Um, yeah, Matthew McConaughey, I thought, did wonderfully, like in that movie.
yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. That there is a somewhat more modern movie that I do think has had an effect on the science fiction genre, simply from a world of, or simply from a matter, I should say, of the topic that it addresses, but also the CGI and the special effects that it brought in that were incredibly groundbreaking, even for that time. And that was
Mhm.
in 1999, The Matrix.
Yeah.
That movie was a massive hit, massive success. It launched a a pretty successful franchise. I mean, they had 3 movies, no, 4 movies now, excuse me. They made that 4th one that they brought back Keanu Reeves. I have not seen it, but I have heard it wasn't that good. And that's nothing against Keanu. I just think the movie I heard wasn't very good, but visually, it was incredible even in 99. And this idea, like you mentioned before, Chris, right, with some of the books back in the day,
Mhm.
talking this idea about being in a simulation
Mhm.
and being in what is reality as we know it. uh the Matrix really captures that idea, right,
Yeah.
of this, is the life we're living, or are we really living this life, or are we just all, you know those types of ideas that have been in other stories, but that really brought to life in a new way in the Matrix. So that's a really, really big one. And then of course Jurassic Park. I mean, some
Yeah.
other ones that in the early 90s. I mean, that movie, special effects and the animatronics that they did, just unbelievable. In fact, that's another Spielberg movie, right? Is Jurassic Park. Um,
Yeah.
and then now I don't know if I would call this sci-fi, but the Superman movie in '78 with Christopher Reeves, that was a significant movie. Again, another 1970s movie, at that time. So, I would call that more of a that's more like comic book, superhero kinda movie and less sci-fi.
Mhm.
But,
Mhm.
I know it's on Digital Trends list of some of those movies. So, there are other movies
Yeah.
we could list. Are there any other ones you can think of that are just either groundbreaking or incredibly impactful, science fiction-wise in the genre?
Yeah, I had a few others that came to mind, like as you know, like us, and me in particular. Well, you and I are both huge Arnold fans, and then James Cameron fans, like Terminator, right? So that
Yeah.
just a huge impact that Terminator had. And we've got, now in our we look at our world, and we've got automated drones that are like everywhere. So you could just envision that idea of Skynet happening,
Oh,
and
with AI
Skynet
and everything, yeah.
AI, yeah,
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 big time. I would say
yeah.
that's big. I'm glad you mentioned that. I not that I forgot. I was saving that for favorites, but yeah,
Oh
that's big
yeah,
too. That's
yeah.
big too. But I would also say, for me, another massive franchise. I don't know if I call it science fiction because
Mm-hmm.
it can fall into a bunch of different categories, but certainly my favorite movies of all time, and that's Back to the Future.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
those movies alone single-handedly made a one type of car become complete collector's cars worth a lot
yeah,
of money, and of course, the DeLorean.
yeah.
And then I would also maybe even throw in 1984, if you want to consider it sci-fi or a comedy, whatever, is Ghostbusters.
Yeah, yeah,
Ghostbusters was incredibly influential for me as a kid, especially.
yeah.
So lots
Absolutely.
out there, and we could go on and on. I mean, there's so many movies where we're not going to be able to list them all. I mean, we could also say Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. That was a significant movie, in science fiction. Empire Strikes Back was, I think, the best of the Star Wars franchise, so that's impactful and influential. So lots
I
of movies.
I am gonna throw in the other two Spielberg ones that I was thinking about. It was AI, artificial intelligence, and then
Oh yeah.
Minority Report.
Oh yeah.
Because yeah, like AI really explored like how if we have artificial intelligence and artificial beings, what's our connection going to be with them? Um,
Mm,
and in terms of relational like connection, and then ability to love. And then Minority Report was just super with the
yeah.
the precognition and all that.
Yeah. Thought
Yeah.
crimes and stuff like
Hmm.
that. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
good. Those are really good. I'm glad you mentioned those. I even think about AI too, Chris, and we did an episode pretty early on actually in the
Hmm.
podcast within the first few episodes of this. If you want to go back and listen to it, it's available anywhere you get your podcast. So if you don't know, this is our 100th episode, but not all of our episodes were done with video. So if you're on YouTube watching us and you subscribe to us and you want to hear some of our early stuff or try to get through some of the sounds of my microphone in the early episodes, you can go find our podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find the Random Red Shirt. So be sure to go back there. Some absolutely wonderful episodes we did, but one of those was AI. And I remember we talked about that. And I think we mentioned about some of the concerns we had, and that was a couple of years ago now. And AI is continuing to get more and more wrapped into things. And I'll be honest with you, Chris, maybe it's just because we watch too many of these sci-fi movies or read too many sci-fi books, but AI scares me. It really does. And you'd think these people who would have watched enough movies to know that it maybe isn't a good idea, but what happens if stuff becomes self-aware or this, that, and the other? I mean, it's a scary thought how so much of what we do today and the things that we have are so connected via technology and how
Yeah.
AI would be influenced by that.
Yeah. It
Or how AI
absolutely
would
is.
influence those things, and could AI take over our lives or wreak havoc and stuff, and it just man, it's scary a little bit.
It is the singularity, it's called, when AI
Yeah.
achieves sentience. And it's interesting because I know I'm going to go a little bit of a rabbit hole, sorry, but this is just fascinating on AI, because I know that the um, even when our scientists are exploring the idea of consciousness,
Mm,
that is still, they're still trying to figure that out. How do you know something is conscience, has consciousness? And that is an emerging field. They're still trying to figure out like uh, the science behind it and figure out what consciousness means. But all that is connected to the singularity, because um, if that's the case, if we're still trying to figure out what does consciousness means for us humans, like how are we going to figure out what consciousness means and sentience means for artificial intelligence? And it is a very scary thing, and it's being, AI is, it's will be ubiquitous, because you've got things like Chat GPT, you've got AI that's like in our
yeah.
browsers, you've got um, people and professionals using AI to kind of craft their professional work. Um, wow, we'll see, man, what's going to happen.
Man, it scares me. It really does. I've seen too many Terminator type movies where AI is no bueno, as you say, Chris. It really it really scares me. But yeah, we could go on and on forever about movies. But let's talk. Let's look at some of the other stuff you had on here, Chris. That you
Yeah.
talked about. Um, there's television and comics and graphic novels and games and video games and what are some other things? Maybe let's talk about some of the stuff that's influenced us personally. What are some of those things that you wrote down or you can think of that really played a key role in who you are and the things that you've grown to like and appreciate?
Just to, in I'll talk about TV first. We can share TV first, and then we'll talk about the other mediums. But
Sure.
some of the ones, I think this is the same for us, because I think we both Battlestar Galactica. So I have the original Battlestar Galactica here, and I know you've got the refresh Battlestar Galactica that you really love. So
Yeah.
I thought, wow, I really love Battlestar Galactica, and I really like behind here I've got Buck Rogers.
Oh
Buck
yeah.
Buck Rogers in the 20th century.
Wow. I didn't
Yeah.
realize you were that big of a Buck Rogers fan. You had that whole set there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just got,
Man.
fondness for Buck Rogers and that, of of course all of the Star Trek and all of the Star Wars for sure, but like, outside of that, um
Well, Buck Rogers was very influential, right? I mean,
mhm,
was that
yeah.
1960s or 1950s?
I think you're
Or was it
right
later
on
than
that.
that?
Yeah.
Was it 60s?
And then this was in the 80s, this refresh of Buck
Mm.
Rogers. But I think Buck Rogers as a character existed like well before well
Yeah,
before
maybe
this
maybe
series.
it's even the 50s, 50s or 60s or something like that for the original, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he, uh, some of the more recent stuff has been like Serenity from Joss William. Oh, I'm gonna get the director wrong, but Serenity.
Yeah,
And
built off the Firefly franchise.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, the Firefly franchise. Um, yeah, so those are some of the ones that come to my mind for television. That's been for me. Like, what about you on TV?
Well, I mean, it starts with Star Trek, obviously. I mean, I know we kind of excluded that because
Yeah.
that's somewhat of a given, right? But Star Trek's been massive. Battlestar Galactica, Babylon 5,
Oh
definitely.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely Babylon 5. I know it's very controversial as far as like some people love it or hate it. There isn't much in between, but I would say X-Files, Stargate, Doctor Who. Surprised you didn't mention Doctor Who. I know that's TV. That's
Yeah, you know what? You're right. I'm so sorry. I completely spaced that out. The Doctor
Oh,
Who and
it's
the
all
X
good.
Files. Yeah,
We have a lot of different things
yeah,
running through our mind, but
yeah.
those are some things that some shows, some TV shows that have been a big influence on me as far from a science fiction perspective. Um, yeah, I mean it obviously it starts with Star Trek. If you go back and watch our top 10 favorite science fiction franchises, number one for me was, or watch, listen,
Yeah.
number one for me was Star Trek, and that's just because of the influence it's had. And Star Wars was a close second. But Star Trek for me has been such a big part of my life, and it's become an even bigger part of my life now as an adult than it was as a kid. I was a Star Wars kid more growing up than I was a Star Trek kid because Star Trek didn't appeal to me as much. I mean, I like the space battles and that kind of stuff, and aliens and things like that. But the storytelling is really what grabbed me as I got older. And then as an adult, obviously. And then when you have a family and you have kids and things like that, it hits you even different.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about Star Trek is that this evolution of, you could watch the same episode 50 times and on the 51st time it's different. It hits you differently. There's something in that episode that's just it feels different. It has a bigger impact on you than it did the first 50 times you watched it, right? But there's those other ones, right? The Babylon Fives and the turn and the Battlestar Galactica's, Doctor Who's, and um, X Files and things like that. That from a television perspective have been very, very influential. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some that I've watched, other shows I've watched, smaller shows, and a lot of those shows are ones that just got canceled for whatever reason.
Yeah.
That I really enjoyed. But yeah, those are some from television that were really impactful for me.
We should go back and do X Files, like, and do some discussions on X Files. I don't think we have done that yet,
We have
right? But
not. No, we have
yeah,
not. Yeah, there are nine plus seasons of X-Files stuff to talk about. Lots of things. I have some definite thoughts on how incredible the show was early on, and then the way it turned after season 6 when Mulder left and Robert Patrick coming in, and all those types of things. I have some thoughts on those. But yeah, X-Files would be great to talk about down the road sometime for sure.
yeah, absolutely. How about animation? Like any, I'll tell you if any came to you. Like some of ones that came to my mind for animation were Ghost in the Shell. That's a animation one set in Tokyo. So it was, if I'm getting it right, getting my animation right, I think this is where they can inhabit like artificial bodies.
Hmm.
Um, and another animated movie called Akira. I think it was an animated Japanese animated movie in
I've
the
heard of that before. Yeah.
yeah. And then I was am a big fan of the Robotech and Macross Saga like animation. Another Japanese, I guess that's the theme there. Like I'm big lover of the Japanese anime, so there we go. Those were the animes for me.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, animation wise, if we're talking just strictly animation, not science fiction or whatever, for me as a kid growing up, the two most influential besides the movies was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the real Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
Those two, I mean, a little bit of Star Wars sprinkled in and some Batman and stuff, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Ghostbusters are probably the two outside of Star Trek and Star Wars. As a little kid, they were the two most influential, biggest parts of my life, and they still are part of my life. I
yeah.
still love the Ninja Turtles. I still love Ghostbusters. Those two, I mean, Ninja Turtles and Ghostbusters was everything to me as a kid growing up in the 80s and the early 90s. Really, really, really big. So I would say those, and that's why I said the real Ghostbusters because that was the animated version, right? I watching those all the time. Um, I really wasn't. I watched a little bit of GI Joe,
Hmm.
but I watched things like the '92 X-Men series.
Oh yeah.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. You know, intro song that's still you hear it and it's instantly stuck in your head because it's so catchy. Some of those kinds of shows. Masters of the Universe was one that I
Mhm.
watched here and there. Wasn't a huge Masters of the Universe fan, but I did enjoy it from time to time. Things like that. So a lot of that stuff was more when I was a kid, and I kind of grew out of the animated stuff. But I will say one animated series I have not mentioned yet. I know we're both big fans of is the Batman animated series from
Yeah.
the '90s. That was fantastic, so well done. I'm pretty sure from the very I wanna say from the very beginning, Mark Hamill was the voice of the Joker in that, and then, of
Yeah.
course, you had,
Oh,
Kevin Conroy,
yeah.
who passed away not that long ago, was the voice of Batman. That was an incredible series. So, yeah, there's a few things from animation that I think was impactful. Later on in my life, you had things like the Clone Wars animated series, Star Wars Rebels I've been watching through with my kids recently, that's been fantastic, really, really good.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
yeah, those are a few things, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, now as I was thinking through comics, on science fiction and comics, I kind of realized that uh, so I did have like in our comics kind of yours and our my comics kind of crossed over like we're both huge Batman fans, I'm a
Yeah.
huge Captain America fan. um Spider I've got some Spider-Man and some X-Men sprinkled in here, and I was a huge Punisher fan.
Yeah.
But the comics that were in science fiction, I was thinking about those, and I realized, oh, okay, my science fiction comics are like Terminator, and and then also Alien. I've got a whole bunch of Aliens comics, and then Predator versus Alien or Predator versus Terminator. So all of those kind of
Yeah.
genre, um, those subgenres from science fiction. So those are kind of mine.
Yeah. Growing up, I really didn't buy a lot of comics. I had some, I
Yeah.
had some, I read some. I had some really weird ones I read when I was a kid, like Ren and Stimpy,
Ah, yeah.
Beavis and Butthead. Don't tell my mom because I wasn't supposed to read those. Um, uh, but don't tell her. She doesn't watch this anyway, so I know she
Yeah,
ain't gonna find out.
you might
Uh,
watch it. She might. Yeah.
I doubt it, Chris. But yeah, I mean, I had some Spider-Man. I had some Ninja Turtle stuff. I think I had some of the real Ghostbusters comics, but it's really hard because I don't really have much of any of the comics from when I was growing up as a kid. Just a couple here and there. But just some of the more recent stuff, obviously Batman, some Marvel things, Amazing Spider-Man, some of the Ghostbusters. The line that IDW did with Back to the Future is fantastic.
Nice.
They did a Back to the Future series. Then they also did a couple sub-series called Biff to the Future, which is all about Biff, obviously.
Mm,
They did a Citizen Brown series. Like I think I have almost all of them. They're really wonderful, really good reads, by the way. Really, really well done comics, based off the Back to the Future franchise.
nice.
In fact, I bought most of them up in Alaska when I lived up there.
Nice.
Not a shameless plug here because I don't owe them anything or whatever, but I shop at Bosco's all the time. I used to get most of them from Bosco's. Um, so yeah, a lot of comic stuff out there. But I didn't read a lot of comics growing up. I bought them, I
Hmm.
read some, but I wasn't an avid comic book guy as a kid.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. We now grew into it, but
Yeah.
yeah, for
Yep.
sure.
Well, it's like my wife always says, I'm a kid trapped in an adult body. It's pretty much the
That's
truth. I never really grew up, which is, I kind of look at it like, hey, stay young, right? Even if you're
right.
physically you're older, but stay young. Keep your mind fresh and stay young and look at it from life from that vantage point. Because, most kids look at life in a way that I think adults need to more. But anyways, so
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm like, I suggested a genre of like of video games as well. I just had one. I don't know if any came to mind for you, but um, this one I'll share because this video game came out in it's a Nintendo game. And it came out in 1986, 87. But it is this, I'm sure you've heard it, but it is the Metroid series
Yeah.
of uh of games. And it is a from that first game that came out that was just much about exploration. Um, but it just spawned like this whole, I guess, genre of games that have tried to be like that. So I thought it has been a very, very um, impactful game, impactful to the genre. Um, and then you realize the protagonist in Metroid at the time in like 86, 87, you didn't realize that the protagonist was a girl, Samus. And so then that was revealed at the end. So that was kind of cool. Yeah. So that's the game I was thinking about as
Mhm.
terms of impactful to science fiction.
Well, I have okay. So if we're talking video games, I
Yeah.
don't know that this isn't going to be impactful to science fiction, but I will share the video games that have been a big part for me.
Yeah.
Um, I can definitely say without a doubt the one video game that I remember, or the couple of video games that I remember as a kid in the arcade back in the day when those were a thing. Back when the arcade was just
Oh.
you go put quarters in a game and play a game versus going and playing for tickets to buy
Oh.
a 20-cent eraser or something. The game that I spent the most quarters on at the arcade was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles
Oh,
arcade
awesome.
game and the Turtles in Time game. Those two games, I spent a lot of quarters on. I also spent a lot of quarters on the Terminator 2 shooter game.
Yeah.
That was a big game. I love that game, even though I got killed all the time in the same friggin' level. Uh, Mortal Kombat, obviously, Street Fighter, some of those, some really wonderful games. I mean, I still remember having an original Nintendo with the original Mario and Duck Hunt. Uh, Geez, I mean, there's so many. Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 3, which was that was a great game, and then of course, um, the Super Nintendo, and now the Nintendo 64
Hmm.
might be the greatest video game console ever. It also,
Whoa,
yeah, yeah,
really?
yeah, 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 yeah. Here's why. It had the greatest shooter game of all time on the 64, and that was GoldenEye.
Ah,
The greatest shooter game. I played that so much, and you could play it for 4 people. And then you had a game called Perfect Dark, where it would actually keep track of your stats, your lifetime stats. They would save them. It was groundbreaking. I remember playing that junk in high school, and it was just groundbreaking. I mean, so some of those games were so impactful. And then I played other games later on. I mean, I was a PlayStation guy for a long time, and then I crossed over to Xbox because of Halo.
yeah,
Specifically, I crossed over around the time that Halo 3 came out. So Halo 3 in that franchise, which is also a big science fiction franchise between the books and now the TV series on Paramount Plus and the video games. I actually even have a Halo book right here, which is the
yeah.
origin story of the Master Chief. Um, I played the heck out of Halo 3. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning games with some buddies I worked with that were just, man, those are some good memories. They're really good memories. So that, I mean, playing, these are non science fiction, playing games like Madden football and baseball and basketball and hockey and, these games, start back on the computer back in the day.
Yeah.
There used to be a game called, Roller Coaster Tycoon. You
Yeah.
built your own theme park. I played that game like crazy. Oh gosh. Star Wars Battlefront, the very original one. And I would be remiss. I have buddies
Mhm.
back home who would kill me if I would be remiss if I did not mention Star Trek Armada, which was an amazing PC game where
Oh,
you built shipyards
yeah.
and built ships and you battled your fleets of ships against other people and other uh, alien races and things like that. And it was and they had a mod where you could bring in Star Wars ships and stuff. And those were the days, man. Just simple gaming. It was wonderful. So yeah, that's video games for me. I've
Oh
been a
man,
big
that's
gamer. I've been a big
wonderful.
gamer almost my whole life, as long as I can remember. So video games have had a big influence on me.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And I know we have enjoyed playing it's Battlefront, right? The one that
Yeah, Star Wars
the
Battlefront
yeah,
2.
Star
Yep.
Wars Battlefront that
Yeah.
we have
Oh yeah,
played.
another game. A game
Yeah.
I used to play all the time with a couple buddies of mine called Left 4 Dead, which was like a zombie survival game.
Oh
And
yeah.
there would be four of you, and you had to go through the maps and you had to survive hordes of zombies coming at you. And yeah, there was some good times there. A lot of great games. Man, bringing back some memories. My goodness.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Nostalgia at its finest, Chris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does bring back memories.
Yeah.
Remember when you and I playing, and if any of you watchers on here, I doubt it, but if any of you watchers play Star Wars Battlefront and your username is ham sauce, um, come in. Zach and I shall avenge our
Oh,
game.
we
So
shall avenge you. Oh,
yeah.
well, speaking of avenge you, Chris, we would be remiss if we didn't mention one of the greatest Star Trek movies of all time that's been so influential on science fiction, and that's Galaxy Quest. How could we
Yes.
not? We cannot forget that movie. People
Yes.
would be angry if we didn't mention Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, that was a brilliant movie, actually.
Yeah.
It was brilliant.
Now, this is not a sci-fi movie, but it's a comedy, but it's based around the fandom of a sci-fi movie, and that's the movie Fanboys. I have to mention that
Oh
movie.
yeah.
It is so good.
Because I didn't know you introduced that movie to me. I didn't know it existed. So that was very fun to see.
It's so good. I love that movie. I will watch that movie probably once a month. I just love it. It's so great. Go watch it, Fanboys. It's free on YouTube with ads, by the way. If anybody wants to watch it, go search YouTube, search Fanboys, and watch it on YouTube. There's guest appearances by some significant actors in that movie.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we've covered a lot of different things and genres.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up with, in addition to the sci-fi stuff, what are a couple of other things? It can be any medium that have been influences on you. I'll start with one just to kind of get it rolling
Mm.
here. To me, that would be well, a combo: The Karate Kid and Jean Claude Van Damme. That started me in my martial arts journey. I'm still massive fans of the franchise and Cobra Kai, and I have a ton of Van Damme's movies. And I watch them fairly regularly. I big influence on me, and still are. Uh, Somebody I have never met, Jean Claude Van Damme. I always wanted to, and I hope I get to one day, because he has had a massive influence on me in my martial arts journey. So those would be a couple things non sci-fi that have been big influences on me in the last 100 years, even though I'm not
In the
100 years
last
old.
100 years. Yeah. Oh wow. So this is just
It's like
things that
pop
have been
culture, yeah.
in
Just pop
pop
whatever.
culture.
Yeah.
Um, any medium that has influenced us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a couple that there's more, but the ones I'll mention that just come to my immediate mind. Uh, Bruce Lee and his movies,
Mm.
right? Because um, he was a groundbreaking martial artist, and um, just watching his movies was just not only entertaining but there was so much energy like contained in those movies, so it was great to see.
Can I interject 1 second here,
Yeah,
Chris, with
yeah.
a quote? There was a quote I was thinking of that I heard. I was watching a video the other day, and someone mentioned something about Bruce Lee, and they mentioned there that Bruce Lee said, "I'm not scared of the man that knows 10,000 different ways to kick. I'm scared of, or not scared, but whatever the term he used was, right? I'm more impressed or influenced by the man who knows how to who's done the same kick 10,000 times."
Hmm.
That's really, like, you think about that, right? That's really big versus just doing all these different kicks, but it's this one, the guy who does the same kick over and over and over and over again. It's that one kick is all he needs. So anyway, sorry, that quote popped in my head from Bruce Lee, and I wanted to throw it out there, but while you were
Oh
talking
no,
about him.
that's great. That's beautiful because it connects to the what the purpose of the kick is,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, that's beautiful. And his quote on you can watch his interview, but he talks about the idea of being like water,
Mm,
and flowing like water and being malleable by like water, or being able to crash like water. I like that philosophy. And certainly he influenced like a lot of people. That
yeah.
was one. And then another one that is completely non-martial arts and non-science fiction is a series of books. I've mentioned it once, but the series of books is called The Chronicles of Prydain, and the author is Lloyd Alexander, and it's a young adult book or children's book, but uh, I have always felt it's a beautiful set of books that follows a young man, young boy, not or a boy, young man named Taryn, and he starts off. He's the assistant pig keeper, and that's it starts off very humbling, and then he learns what it is to be a person, like through all of these adventures, and it ends up with the last book is called The High King, but he has to it he learns what it is to be a person, and through it he's fighting evil, and he has a mentor, much like it's much like Star Wars actually when you think about it, but
Mm,
that's the book. I would
mm,
recommend it to anyone.
recommend you do.
Indeed I do.
It's funny you mentioned that, young reader books, because that I'm glad you mentioned that. I was gonna say this earlier, but now I'll say it now because you mentioned the books. A book series that I got into when I was younger and was captivated by for most of my younger years growing up was the Goosebumps series from the
Yeah.
90s, starting in 92 from R.L. Stein. In fact, I've got a few of the original ones upstairs. I used to have almost all of them. I don't know whatever happened to them. I think they were given away or donated, whatever. I wish that hadn't happened, but yeah, they're incredible books. I've introduced my kids to them, and some great stories, some scary stories that are also
Yeah.
funny. And so yeah, that's another big time book series that influenced me when I was younger, was the Goosebumps series.
Oh man, that's cool.
Yeah.
That makes me
Yeah.
want to get into the Goosebumps series.
They're good, and because they're written for a young audience, you can read through them pretty quick. You probably read a book a day almost if you really wanted to. They read pretty quick. So,
Awesome. Nice,
yeah.
nice.
Yeah, man,
Yeah.
let me just give one more influential thing here
Mhm.
as we wrap this up, because this influence is, I don't know if I'd call it pop culture, but this influence on me was massive. So much so that it's the, and I think I mentioned this before, the only quote unquote celebrity that I've ever, you know, cried over when they passed away, and that was Steve Irwin. I remember growing
Yeah.
up, watching with my mom all the Crocodile Hunter stuff, and his, especially, when he first started out. We watched him from pretty much the beginning when he first started, his stuff first started making it over here from Australia, and his love for conservation and animals really had an impact on me. I think, um, in addition to my mom, his love for animals is what really gave me my passion, love for animals and for reptiles, and
Mhm.
especially, but animals in general. And the idea of conservation and protecting wildlife and things was so critical and so influential on me. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention, if we're talking about just influential stuff and things, in society, in life. It was Steve Irwin's right there towards the very top.
Nice. That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
Dude, 100 episodes. Here we are.
Yeah, and
Isn't that
here
crazy?
it is, and soon we'll have 100 more. We'll be doing episode 200.
It's, I'm just appreciative. I'm appreciative to those of you who watch and listen to us, for those of you who have come on with us and shared your lives and careers, and to you, Chris, for dedicating your time to this, because this has been it's been awesome. I look forward. We have so much more great things coming in this new year. We're recording somewhat early in 2024. Um, and I just look forward to all the stuff we have coming down the pipe. It's gonna be so awesome. We look forward to so many things coming. It's just gonna be great.
Yeah, it absolutely will. I mean, I think I thank you, Zach. This has been just a wonderful experience and a wonderful journey. And so, and having our viewers and the guests on has just been incredible. And our friendship, has grown, um, just grown so much over the years, and doing this has just been super.
Yeah. I love the podcast gives us an excuse to talk to each other about the stuff we love.
Yeah.
That's and because that's how it started, right? The phone calls. We just started talking all the time about the things we like and our passions and shows we're watching and movies we're watching and things we're doing in life. And the podcast is just an excuse for us to break away from life for a little bit and talk about these fun things. And hopefully the content we've made, and whether it's been the audio episodes or the YouTube videos or both, that you have enjoyed out there, those of you watching, listening, that you are enjoying them, that they're bringing you some level of happiness and joy. Maybe it's an escape for you from things going on or whatever. But we really hope that they've been a blessing to you in your lives, because just doing this has been a blessing, I think, for both of us.
Yes, it has. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, man. Well, here's to I only have a water bottle. So cheers. Here's to 100, Chris.
There's 200,
Here,
Zach.
here,
Yeah.
here, and hopefully 100 more, and even more than that, over 100 more. So yeah, this is wonderful. Thank you all so much for watching and listening all over the interwebs and the globe. We do appreciate it. As always, be sure to go on to Facebook and Instagram. Check us out there and follow us for more. Follow us on YouTube, subscribe, do all this stuff. Like I said early on in this episode, we very much appreciate that. And we look forward to bringing you more amazing content, more deep dives, more reviews, more celebrity guest conversations or interviews, whichever you prefer to call them, in the future. With that being said, I'm Zach.
I'm Chris.
And this is the Random Redshirt Podcast. And here's to 100 and 100 more. Take care, everybody. We'll catch you next time.